to the bunker.
Preppers, survivalists, off-gridders, homesteaders, and the like, welcome to Top's Bunker, a podcast for preppers. Our email is shtf@topsbunker.com. Our website is topsbunker.com. Don't forget to check the show notes in your podcast player for a link to help support the show, valuable products and gear, and extra info on this episode. I want to thank you all for joining us. We've got a great show for you. Now, let's begin. The world wasn't always concrete and steel. Once, a long time ago, the night sky was our ceiling. The forest was our shelter. The hunt was our heartbeat. Before empires, before machines, before the grid, there was only man, his will, and the wild. They were the first survivors, the hunter-gatherers, men and women who moved like shadows through endless forests, tracking, foraging, trapping, fighting for every bite of life. They didn't need electricity. They didn't need convenience. And survival was their language. Then came the cities, the noise, the illusion of safety. We forgot what it meant to live by instinct. We traded skills for comfort and electric light and for the glow of our screens. But comfort is fragile, and when it crumbles, only the old ways remain. Imagine the grid goes down, the world goes dark. The hum of the power lines and air conditioners goes quiet. Civilization stumbles, and somewhere in that silence, something ancient stirs awake inside us. The pulse of the wild, the call of survival, the blood memory of those who came before us. The future now belongs to those who remember the past, those who can track and forage and fight for life itself, those who can once again become the hunter-gatherer. Tonight we dive into that world. Jeremy, an avid hunter, brings truth and reality to what it takes to be a hunter-gatherer during an SHTF event. If we want to survive, we must learn and master the lessons of our ancestors and how their way of life may just be the key to surviving the collapse of our own. This is Hunter-Gatherer, a Top's Bunker limited series.
I made hot sauces last week with habaneros and all kinds of red peppers and just really nice stuff. I made two, one a green sauce and one a red sauce. Rhonda loves the green sauce, and I use on that one I use cilantro, lime, green jalapenos, and black pepper. She loves black pepper, so I made this sauce and it came out great. And I made a red one too. Well, that was like I think that was like on a Saturday morning. Sunday, I'm taking a shower in the morning and my eyes start burning. I'm like, why is my eyes burning? Mm-hmm. And then I smell my hands and it's the peppers. They were on my hands since the day before. And I had washed my hands dozens of times because I have chickens. I work, with nasty stuff. So I'm constantly washing my hands. That don't come off, man. That stuff is really hard to come off, that oil.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 So we'll keep pecking at the garden as long as it's producing stuff. So.
Right. That's right.
So what are we talking about tonight?
Well, we're doing hunter-gatherer, and I think it's that time of season now where hunters are really getting excited, and it's probably already started. I think that, like you said, bow season has already started, and I think I want to say firearm season. Actually, I think firearm season has started for youth here in my area.
Yeah, so we have our youth areas or youth dates. Right now, we are in muzzleloader. And during the changes of your season type, so you start with your primitive weapon, which is your bow. Here in North Carolina, we can use crossbows. It used to be in a lot of states where only people who were handicapped or the elderly could use crossbows, but anybody can use them now.
So what you're saying, there's some places that don't let you use a crossbow.
Yeah, there are
Really?
conditions. Yeah, and it's because the way crossbows are designed nowadays. I mean,
They're
they're
powerful.
they're stupid powerful.
Right.
Mine, I have a crossbow, and it's a lot of fun. And it's shooting at 450 FPS, which,
Wow.
some people think, that's not a lot. You're hurling an
Yeah.
arrow at 450 feet per second, and I use mechanical broadheads.
And for now, now are those called bolts or are those
Yeah.
arrows?
That's a bolt. It's
Yeah,
a
so
bolt.
they're like it's like a deadly weapon, man. It's serious.
It is. It's ridiculous. I killed a deer last year with a crossbow, and she was a doe, and it wasn't like she wasn't tremendously big, and a lot of the does around here are not. But the damage that it did when it passed through, and it was a clean right through and through, and you can always tell when you get a hit because most deer will buck, like they kick their feet back, they react very quickly. But she ran, I want to say, not even 50 yards, and you could just see on both sides it was just a fountain, just a fountain of blood.
Oh, you hit the heart.
Yeah, actually. So, and it depends on what, kind of weapon system you're using, but typically on a deer, when you are looking at the broadside of a deer, you want to aim just to the right and above the forward, their forward shoulders, basically their front haunches. And you have to be able to get past like their scapula. So on a deer, in the anatomy wise, when you are looking at it broadside, our scapula is basically in our back. So theirs extends above what would be their shoulder, that shoulder joint.
Yeah.
And a lot of people make the mistake of, one, they think that because the deer's head is down and it's eating, that it's more vulnerable, and it's actually not. They have an instinctual reaction when they are head down and eating. The moment they hear a sound, their body drops, and a lot of hunters will miss their shot or pull off a bad shot, where the animal suffers because they don't realize, one, when they're bent down, their shoulder blades are a little higher, and it's actually protecting the heart. But you want to get them broadside. You want to get them when they're standing. And the goal is to have a double lung hit. So it goes through and through both lungs. And if ideally you can actually either penetrate or do damage to the heart. So if you're shooting bow or a crossbow, typically a lot of them don't drop instantaneously. Some do, just depending on the hit. But you're trying to, one, prevent the animal from suffering, and two, minimize the amount of tracking that you have to do, because tracking is really a skill that has to be developed over time. So anyway, so you go from archery into muzzleloader. While you're in muzzleloader, you can still shoot archery. And when you go into rifle, you can utilize all three. Here in North Carolina, we also have, you can hunt shotgun as well, depending on the area that you're in. And there are requirements for shooting shotgun here. You can't use anything. You have to use a rifled slug. So you have to have the proper barrel for that, But a lot of hunters, surprisingly, as popular as archery is, a lot of hunters will not hunt archery. They'll just wait till rifle season. But there's so much to be able to get done during your archery season. I love archery season.
You mean done, meaning out at your place? Yeah.
So all of your work has to be done beforehand. So setting up your areas, scouting, looking for sign, doing the things that need to be done to ensure that you have success. And of course, a lot of it's luck, but you want to have success so you get the work done prior to. If that means clearing out lanes, if that means putting down food plots earlier in the spring, which, a lot of larger places with open land will do that because it attracts deer. It creates a semi-permanent feeding structure for deer So a lot of, farmers that hunt their property, they'll have a smaller area set aside to basically provide the nutrition to the deer year round. And they watch those areas and they scout it. And, it's not necessarily guaranteed success, but it improves your success.
Yeah.
And if you're someone like me, all of my days of really looking for that big buck with, great antlers and all that stuff, those days are done for me. If I happen to see one, great. If not, my intent is to fill our freezer with meat. So our entire family hunts, and it's really great because our kids have a really rooted structure that they need to hunt to provide. It's not just a sport. It's not just that it's exciting, which it is, but there's a purpose behind it. And if you looked at beef prices over especially during the last administration, beef prices were completely outrageous. So
ridiculous.
Yeah. So, we've got meat in our freezer. We've got probably a year to a year and a half's worth of meat still in our freezer. And that's from the last 2 seasons. So,
wow.
Yeah. And, and that also comes down to your storage, because I did put out a video on the Facebook page how I was taking apart that one deer, separating the different muscle groups and, cutting up the different parts. If you get it sealed up properly, because air is the death of meat in a freezer. So vacuum sealing, removing all the air, creating a enclosed environment, putting it in the freezer, that helps prevent a lot of that, freezer burn. But I mean, as far as meat goes, venison and the deer family is some of the most healthy meat that you can consume. It really is. The only problem is that they're not fatty unless you're shooting like a moose or an elk, or something like that. Regular whitetail deer, they are definitely not fatty.
And there's there's elk hunting actually here in Missouri. They brought elk in years ago, I think back in the 80s or 90s or something like that.
Yeah.
And they've been building up building them up.
Yeah. And a lot of the elk herds that were there, it's a reintroduction plan. So elk, unfortunately, sort of like, the buffalo, sort of like a lot of the animals that we have here in North Carolina, settlers, going west, they decimated, populations of animals, a lot of it not necessarily for consumption, but for sport and for their hides. And it's an unfortunate reality that many herds of elk and moose and animals like that were almost hunted out of extinction in some areas. But kind of like with the Yellowstone, the elk population had become so overgrown, the herd health was bad. The health of the environment itself was bad because there was no hunting allowed at that time.
So you're talking about overpopulation.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. Hunting is also needed, and a lot of people who, the PETA folks out there, and I get it, but they don't realize or take into account that as if deer type animals in that family, your whitetails, your muleys, your elk, your moose, caribou, all of those animals, they will populate themselves out. They will die if the herd health is not adhered to. And that's where hunters come in. Hunting is needed to control the population of game animals. So we have a ton of deer here, right? And there's always going to, I say that, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but there should technically be always a bunch of deer here. But the thing is that if there's too many, they're competing for resources, they're competing for food, they're competing for the same things that people compete for. And during certain times of the year, deer are super dumb, especially your males. They go absolutely buck wild, and that's what we call the rut. And during the rut, they will attack each other. They'll attack us. They'll attack a car. Why do you think people have pictures out there of a deer that impaled itself on a car, going 60 miles an hour? Because sometimes bucks, they just can't control themselves. But hunting,
that's crazy.
It is. Yeah. Just Google that and you'll see like an entire deer that attacked a vehicle while it was moving. And it's just ridiculous. But the hunting of deer animals and game animals is necessary to control the size of those herds. And by controlling the size of the herd, you increase the health of the herd. So if you wean out some of the females, like here, I can take 4 does and 2 bucks, or what they're called antlered or non-antlered deer. And you have to take out some of the does. I know people disagree with that. I know that they're like, well, what about, the babies? And I've said this before, hunting season is designed where by the time hunting season starts, those fawns that were born in the spring are now able to take care of themselves and wean off of mother's milk by the time hunting season starts. So as long as you have hunters out there that are ethical, right, and they're actually doing the right thing, they can definitely spot the difference between a mature doe, a young doe, and a fawn. So you take out some of those older does, which pushes the younger does into estrus and allows them to breed. And by allowing them to breed, you're introducing new stock into those herds. And by taking out your older males, and culling them, you're allowing the opportunity for other bucks to come in and actually breed, because not every buck gets to breed. Not all, nobody is guaranteeing that those guys are out there doing their thing. They're going to try and they're going to fight, but in reality, the female controls the breeding cycle. They control who's going to actually get to breed with them. And that is why you see videos and pictures of bucks fighting. That's why they lock up. That's why they do the thing that they do, because they are competing for the dominance of the herd, but they're also ensuring that the strongest one usually is going to be able to breed with that female and create a really strong, healthy deer for the next generation, and so on and so forth.
That's nature. I mean, yeah. We look at it as being like, in the human society, we look at it as women being like, oh, the gold diggers or this and that. But it's inbred that the women look for a man that will provide the best provider for their children, that sort of thing. It's in our nature. And then of course with men, it's in our nature to, sorry to say this, but to spread your seed, and that's where the buck wild comes into play,
Yeah.
In a normal society, we know what to do. The deer don't. But I can tell you this, from living out in the woods, I see the animals now. And in my first year living here was a learning experience. And the second year, I'm starting to understand it now. And I can see like the population, like after hunting season, they're gone, man. You don't see them. They're like, they just disappear. And then the closer and closer you get, like today on my way to town, I'm 20 minutes in the woods before I get to the main highway. I must have seen 20, 25 different, deer animals out there. Yeah. You don't see that, 6-8 months ago. You don't see that.
And again, it does depend on your area. You guys have some healthy sized deer out there. Our deer out here, typically, they're not enormous, but they're not tiny. When I was stationed in Georgia, the deer are a lot smaller. You have your random, large ones, depending on the area of Georgia. But when I was stationed there, I could fill my whole tag in one day if I wanted to. That's how many deer are there.
So talk about that though in a minute when you can. Talk about that the tag part and how that works.
So each state is different. Here in North Carolina, like I said, you can take 4 antlerless and 2 antlered. And the reason they started referring to them as antlered and antlerless is every once in a while, genetic mutation, you will find a female deer with antlers. And sometimes you will find a male deer with none. Or you will find where their antlers grow like wonky. A lot of it has to do with genetics and unfortunately inbreeding, and stuff like that. And that's another reason why you try to eliminate some of those older bucks to remove them from the area to get new bucks to come in. And what that does is that kind of cleans up that gene pool, because there is inbreeding in the animal kingdom. You know, it happens. But the thing is that, and again, every state is different. And like even here, if you want to go hunt elk up in the mountains, it is a draw. You actually register. It's basically playing the lottery. That is the way it is in a lot of states like Colorado, Wyoming, and stuff like that. Their hunting for larger game animals is controlled from a draw. You actually enter a lottery. But their population is completely different.
So does that mean that there are more hunters than there are animals?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But here, when you get your tags for what, and they consider big game here is deer are big game here, which not every state considers, deer to be a big game animal. The population, again, it's got to be controlled, and deer do compete over resources, just like we do, like I mentioned earlier. So right now on the property that I've been hunting for years, I've got two main bucks, and one of them I call a small six. So he's probably about like two, maybe 2.5. And then I have what's called a tall six. He's still a 6-point buck, meaning that he has his main tines and he has a total of 6 points that are coming off of his actual antlers. The tall six, probably about 3.5. I mean, I don't know if he's quite 4. I don't think he's 4. He's nocturnal right now. And your buck population is funny because for the majority of the year, they're actually in what's called bachelor groups. So they hang out together. They're buddies. And they drop their antlers and then they're buddies again. But during the rut, you can see this change in them. They start to thicken up. Their neck gets bigger. And they start eating a lot, because going into the rut, they actually don't eat a lot. And the reason being is they're chasing down females. They're looking for females. They want to breed. They've gone completely out of their mind. And that is the most exciting time, because bucks who are in the rut are willing to do stupid things. They come out at stupid times because their brain isn't quite wired right anymore. The caution that they've had kind of goes away, and they're willing to come out during odd times to look for does to be able to mate with them. And that's what we call lockdown. Once they've found a doe, right, or a couple of does, they are in the process of mating, and they mate like a lot. And that's what we call the lockdown phase. Right now, we are in what we call pre-lockdown. So they're still eating, they're still out. But the smaller six right now, he is starting to thicken up. Like, he's getting big in the neck, I can tell. But the back of the legs, what you start looking for is this black, oily substance. It's disgusting. It smells awful. But it starts to develop out of these glands on the back of their legs. And that musky smell is what they use to mark areas, to communicate, kind of like a lot of animals do. But that bigger one, when I start to see him come out during the day, then I definitely know the rut is about to be on.
Because normally they are like dusk and dawn type animals, right? In the middle of the day, they just disappear.
Yeah. Yeah. During the day, during the heat of the day, you're not going to find deer. I mean, if you do find a deer out there in the middle of the day,
could be something wrong with it.
Well, it could be, or it could be that it's just hungry, maybe he got up from a nap and he's like, oh my God, I need to eat, and just starts going looking for food. And that's why a lot of us use, food plots, or we use, I use corn. I'm not going to lie. I use corn. I use it on private property though. I don't, go out to, public game lands and use corn or anything like that. But you can use attractants, you can use smells, you can use scents, you can do those kinds of things. My grandfather taught me when I was a kid, keep a bunch of rocks in your pocket, small rocks, and you actually chuck them from your stand, and it sounds like acorns hitting the ground. So, deer love acorns because they're fatty. That's one of their biggest meals that they're looking for. And you actually trick them into thinking that there's acorns falling on the ground. And you bring them in that way.
It's acorn season right now, man. And we have, we have metal roofs, in on all of our buildings, and you just hear them all day. Bang, boom, bang.
Yeah. But again, there's a million and one ways to do it. But it's the excitement of it for me personally. I've got game cameras out right now. I'm watching these guys building patterns. I have not been successful the past couple of times that I've been out, but there were extenuating circumstances. Like I've got these guys that like to cause problems every time they know I'm out there hunting, so that's one thing. But there's the necessity of hunting now. Now, for us preppers and people who are, into preparedness and, know that something is going to happen in the future, there's going to be a completely different reality, I think. I think that again, I've talked about the romanticized idea of, disappearing in the woods and, living off the land and all these things. And I try to tell people that's not realistic thinking. Everybody, who watched Red Dawn coming up like me, thinking the same thing, that they're just going to go disappear in the woods and build themselves their own little cabin and all this mess. They're going to live off the land and hunt animals, and that's how they're going to live for the rest of your life. Everybody else who thinks that they're going to go into the woods and hunt the animals is going to be doing exactly the same thing. And when stuff does hit the fan, if there, let's just say, for instance, the collapse that we always talk about without rule of law, nobody's going to be paying attention to seasons anymore. Nobody's going to be paying attention to regulations anymore. And they're just trying to feed themselves and their families. So what are they going to do? Any opportunity that they can to kill an animal that they know that they can consume, that's what they're going to do. And I've talked about the book 1 Second After, and it kind of hits on that, where they have a group of individuals who their whole intent is to go and do some hunting and bring the meat back. Well, in the book, it talks about everything is almost hunted out of existence. And I think that that's a reality. I think that given enough people who are not prepared, but they do hunt, or let's just say they get a hold of a gun and they've got this notion, I can kill an animal and I can eat said animal, they're going to be in the woods trying to do that. And they're going to kill off deer and bear and all the major game animals in a rather rapid fashion. And I think that people really don't think about just how quickly that can happen. And again, I go back to settlers that were traveling west back in the 1800s. They slaughtered millions upon millions upon millions of buffalo, and they almost died out completely. They almost went extinct. And that same thing of hunting in excess, I think, is a reality that most people don't think about. That's why we store what we eat or what we kill. And I have a strict policy in our house, at least, that we will consume or utilize as much of that animal that we possibly can. Because one, to do anything less than that is a disrespect to the animal itself.
Agreed.
But two, you got to be able to utilize that whole animal. In the old days, the entirety of the animal was used. The skin, the tendons, the bones, the antlers, the blood, everything that was inside of that animal was utilized by the natives and by other early people that came here. And a lot of people don't really think about that. The stomach, the
head. They would cook the whole head, and you can eat everything in it.
Yeah, you can eat the brain. Now, personally, I don't want to eat deer brain. I mean, it doesn't sound. I've had pig's brain, not appealing. It's not great. But everything inside of that animal and on the outside was cleaned up and used. They used to use the stomach to actually carry water and carry other stuff. Right. They would clean it. They would wash it. They would remove the membrane. and it's an elastic bag. It's really what it is. The liver inside of a deer, when you pull out the liver and you look at it, and I think I showed that in that video from last year. But what you're looking for is it's a deep, dark red. And again, when you start talking about foods that correlate with, what you're trying to energize in your own body, I do not like liver, but the liver is one of the most prized pieces inside of a lot of game animals, especially for predatory animals. That's one of the first things they go for is the liver.
I like liver.
I mean, it's not my top. I will eat it if I have to. But you got to dress it up for me.
Of course.
But that's like the heart. A lot of people will not eat heart. I've eaten heart. It's just another muscle group inside of there.
Well, the only heart that I've eaten is from turkeys and I guess chickens, but turkeys, I love it.
Yeah. I mean, but those are, the size of
they're tiny.
Yeah. They're tiny. A deer
in my household, as a kid growing up, I always got the heart. Everybody's like, save the heart for Keith. And I'm like, hell yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. A deer heart is not tiny. It's a large piece of meat.
But it's the same thing. You can cook it and eat it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
You gotta do some stuff to it. It has connective tissue in there as well. But once you get it cleaned up and you actually start slicing across, it's just another muscle, but I have a strict policy about utilizing as much of the deer that we possibly can. I want to maximize as much meat as we can get out of that one animal. So you've got your larger pieces of meat, you got your roasts, you got your steaks, and of course everybody wants the backstrap. I actually chastised a young man because that's the only thing he wanted. He's like, oh, I just want the backstrap. I'm going to throw the rest away. I was like, you're out of your damn mind.
Everybody talks about the backstrap. What's the big deal? Is it like the most tender meat or something?
Some people think it is. That's the tenderloin. Okay. So it's, it's the back of the animal. So as you travel along the spine,
there's one on each side, right?
There's one on each side, but there's actually technically two more on the inside. So if you were looking in the reverse angle from looking at the rib cage opened up and you go down towards the hind quarters, there's two, some people call them the scallops, but there's two more tenderloins on the inside that you can get, and they're extremely tender. So again, the reality of hunting during SHTF or without rule of law or the collapse, I think that it'll go good for a very short amount of time. And when I say short, my guess, and this is just an opinion, within, I would say 2 to 3 years maximum. And that's being generous. Most game animals that people would go looking for are not going to be available. And they're going to be so pressured by so many people who have the same idea. They're going to become almost reclusive to the point of being completely nocturnal. And deer are very much nocturnal animals sometimes. They are.
I think what's going to happen. I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry, but I think in a grid down situation, as soon as you get into a long term, like as soon as we know this is a problem and we need to start hunting, I have a feeling that you're going to see communities put out security and on the edge of their areas, their hunting areas, to keep people out. And I'm pretty sure when there's no rule of law, that is a shoot to kill situation.
Yeah.
It's just going to be that way. They're going to protect their food.
Yeah. And some individuals who are lucky, and like say you have an expansive piece that you have fenced and you've created gaps, for animals to come in and out. Those individuals might be lucky enough to be able to sustain herds inside of their property, as long as those herds have the resources that they need. And
as long as they can protect their property.
Yes, that's the big part. And again, this kind of goes back to how dangerous a lone, quote unquote, lone wolf mentality can be, because one person cannot pull security 24 hours a day and do all of the work necessary.
That's right.
It can't be done. That's why at groups, mutual assistant groups, the things that we always talk about, that's why it's so important, because you're not just trying to protect your land, like your castle. you're also trying to protect the resources that are on that land, and the animals that you hunt and consume are part of those resources. And again, this also goes to, what people think they wouldn't consume now as compared to what they're going to want to consume, like anything they can get a hold of. And this is where we start talking about squirrels and birds and stuff like that. Squirrels, let's talk about that. I actually like squirrel.
So you didn't mute yourself, but I definitely do not hear you right now.
Uh-oh. Did I mute?
There you go. There you go.
Oh, do I get the thing?
I don't know, because I was watching and the mute didn't come on. So you must have maybe muted your mic or something, like your actual microphone.
No, I think the screen went dark, and sometimes it just.
Oh,
I don't know. That's weird.
That was a glitch.
Yeah, the Matrix. It has us. But squirrels are, I think, very tasty. I like them. They are a lot tougher than people think that they are. There's not a lot of meat on them, but the meat that you do get off of them is quite tasty, in my opinion. And even though it can be gamey and it can be tough, if you slow cook them and you do it over a period of time, you get a better taste. That's what I think. Birds like doves. We've talked about doves before. You don't get a lot of meat from a dove. But if you have 20 or 30 doves, then you've got a good meal. One of the things that I do is I will actually in my backyard.
If you have potatoes and tomatoes and peppers to go along with it, you got a meal.
That's what I was about to say. So I do what's called wild stew. I will take, say, like 8 squirrels. And if I can get enough doves, say 15 to 20 doves, I'll get them all cleaned up and do all that. And then I'll put them in either a crock or a large pot, and I will just put it on low, and I will simmer them over many, many hours. Put some seasoning in there, kind of just do it that way. And after a couple of hours, that meat just falls right off the bones. And a lot of people also, they have this idea in their head that, you're just going to put a whole animal in there and you're going to get a bunch of bones. You separate the bones, but the connective tissue and the tendons and those things over time and heat, they actually break down. And that's why, when you start to, like, when you set meat, like a meal aside, and it gets cooled off and you see that gelatinous jelly, that was at one point in time, that was the connective tissue and the tendons and the sinew that were binding all of that stuff together that broke down. So that gelatinous, like jelly from some meats that you set aside, that's what that was. And fat and stuff like that. But like squirrels don't have a lot of fat on them. They're tree rats, Doves don't have a lot of fat on them.
The thing is, they're healthy. I mean, squirrels don't eat meat. They're healthy. They eat nuts and stuff, and insects and things like that.
Yeah, but the thing is that now, then this is where we have to kind of delve into that part, and we'll start historically. Columbus Day has passed. When those guys came over here, and even the Spaniards when they got here. 1492, during that time frame, they saw the rabbits running around, and they were killing rabbits left and right because there were so many of them, and they tasted good. The problem is they were still starving to death. And there are some animals that have almost no nutritional value whatsoever because they have absolutely no fat on their body. Deer are not fatty animals. You have to introduce a fat source into your cooking with them, or you're just going to get dry, meat. You can still eat it.
Okay, so how does a prepper prep for that? I mean, what would you add to, let's say, because I have heard that too, where you could actually be unhealthy and eating rabbit, nothing but rabbit.
You could be eating well and still starve to death, and here's why. As a prepper, there's a lot of things that people set aside. We set aside these emergency rations, or we do all the things. The problem is not a lot of people store fat because over the years, people have been told fat's bad for you. That's a lie. It's you need fat in your body. You need it. And especially when you're waking up during the day, fats and proteins in the morning are super duper important. And a lot of people, they set fat aside and they just get rid of it or they give it to their dogs. Instead, you should be rendering your own tallow. And you can do that on your own. Or you can go to a butcher shop because, a lot of people, they buy a steak, they don't want a bunch of fat on it. So you go to a butcher shop and you say, hey, I want to buy X amount of pounds of fat. And they'll just give you X amount of pounds of cow fat.
Is that right?
Yeah. You render your own tallow. Tallow,
which means
tallow.
Boiling it down.
Yes. You boil it down and then it's just a process. So you take this fat, you cut it up, put it in a large pot and you boil it. And you not like a hard boil, but a simmery boil, like a low boil.
Right,
and you do that and you stir it. And this is where you get your cracklings. That's where you get that stuff from. And then you set it aside, let it cool and harden. You flip that over and you'll see what looks like dirtier fat on the bottom. You scrape that off. You melt that fat back down with a little bit of water and you go through this process a couple of times. And you'll end up with pure lard. Tallow is lard. Lard is tallow. And for many, many years, people bought, large things of lard. And, that's when they started telling you everything fatty is bad. That's not the case. You have to have fat in your cooking. You have to have some kind of fat source.
There's an old time prepper I saw come on a commercial one time. He's like some famous guy. He said that lard is like a prepper's superfood.
Yeah.
Like you need to have it. Like you should be storing it.
Yeah. And it lasts for a very, very long time. I don't know, the reality of the shelf life, but I do know it's quite some time. Good old Crisco lard. I don't, commercialized lard. I'm always a little bit weary of,
well, it has preservatives in it, I think.
Yeah.
The store-bought one.
Yeah. Rendering your own homemade tallow, your own lard is one of the best ways to go. And learning how to make your own butter. If you have access to the cream, a lot of people don't realize if you set milk aside and it separates and you have the whey and the cream and the cream comes at the top, take that. And that's where, when you see those, in the old times and they were churning the butter, what they're doing is they just took the cream portion of the milk, they put it in that churn, and literally butter is just, it's the cream that was beat into submission. That's where butter comes from. Natural butter, like homemade natural butter, is freaking amazing. And you can season it any way you want.
And it's really good for you too.
Yes, it's extremely good for you. And it's so easy. I got to learn how to do it. I haven't done it yet. I want to learn how. But from what I have gathered is you can literally season your butter that you've made any way you want. If you've got herbs from the garden that you want to dress that butter up with, you can do that. If you just want regular.
You say that, but Rhonda did that this week with the herbs from the garden, and it was
really
amazing. Yes,
nice. Well, that's
so I made homemade bread, and we smeared it on there with some toast, and it was like, whoa, that's like, you can't get that in a grocery store, man.
No, And some people will, they spend a lot of money on it, but like there's a brand, Kerry, they make what's called Kräuter butter. It's from Germany. And it's seasoned butter. They put natural herbs and whatnot in there. But if you can make your own butter, if you have the ability to do that during a collapse kind of situation, that just do that. But if not, you're going to have to learn how to render fat. And rendering fat is going to be very, very important, and it's going to carry its weight in gold.
So I heard that, rendering fat down could also be used for like oil lanterns or candle wicks or stuff like that.
Natural tallow can be used for so many things. It is one of the best skincare products.
Preservative for your leather, like your boots, your gloves, things like that.
Yeah. A little bit of tallow goes a whole long way. But you got to have, when it comes to deer animals or, those kind of larger game animals, you got to have some fat, or else it's just going to be dry. And
so you add that in when you're cooking.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I do, like right now, for instance, when I cut away my bigger portions of meat and I set that aside, my scrap is what I call my burger pile. So I'm going to ground that up into either what we call burger or, sausage or whatever.
Uh-huh.
When I go through the process of grinding that meat, I actually grind in pork sausage with it. So, yeah, because pork sausage is very fatty already. Yeah. So one, it adds a nice sort of layer of flavor to it. But two, it's you're not having to add any extra fat because your fat is coming from the pork sausage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great way to do it. And I tried my hand at making sausage. It just didn't look right. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it looked, lumpy. I have the casings. Like, I tried the natural casings and then the I think it's called cellulose casings or whatever. Right. I got the grinder thing and I got it looks like a tube, and you put it in the casing and it just starts shooting the meat in there. And I'm like, holy crap. And I don't know like where to stop it and crimp it. And I don't know. It looked crazy.
Does it come out I mean, I've seen it on like industrial stuff,
yes.
Like in kitchens, and it comes out really fast.
Yeah. So because it's going from a large portion to a narrow, and as soon as it hits the narrow portion, it starts coming out quickly. And I'm like, damn, where do I stop this thing? Like, I don't know what to do. I gotta perfect that. But it's I don't know how to tell people this, but because they've got these notions in their head of what's good and what's not. And a lot of people think you can just take a slab of, deer and slap it on a grill and it's going to be great. No, it's not. It's going to be the driest steak you ever had in your life. If you don't
butter it up,
you got to do something, to them. Now, elk is a little bit different. Elk are fatty. Moose are very, very fatty. Caribou are extremely fatty. People, bear, if you hunt bear meat, in my opinion, is delicious. It's got kind of like if you've ever had grizzly, it's got kind of a natural sort of peppery taste to it. But they're ridiculously fatty animals.
I've seen hunters like I used to watch the Meat Eater. I think it was the Meat Eater. I think it was called.
Yeah,
I used to watch that program, and that they would on a hunt, they would actually cut it up and eat steaks right there over the fire. So I don't know if they mix stuff into it. I think sometime they brought bacon fat with them. Maybe they cooked that in with it, or something like that. They maybe greased the pan with it and threw it in there.
Yeah, I use bacon grease quite a bit too. And bacon grease is extremely easy to render to get clean grease. I've got a couple of jars of solid white bacon grease. Then I use it for, almost anything that requires.
We did that growing up too. We would save it in a cup. But I think what you're talking about is like you sieve it out, you filter it, and then you put it in the refrigerator and cool it off, right? Yeah.
Yeah. While it's hot, I run it through a strainer, and then I also run it through a coffee filter. Oh, and that removes, your stuff.
Yeah,
and then
little bits and pieces.
Yeah, and then if it's still kind of dark, I'll put it in a different pan and I'll reheat it and I'll go through that process again. And what you put in the jar, like we have jars of it in the fridge, it's just pure white bacon grease. And again, go back to what it is. It's lard. Right. And the great thing about bacon grease is it's already salty. So you've got salty fat, which you need salts. So you got salty fat that's set aside, and you start, the best example I can think of, Lord of the Rings, when he's sitting around and he's looking at the hobbits and they're talking about they're eating salted pork.
Yeah.
But the thing is that salted pork was from an animal that was salted, which is how a lot of people
preservative.
They preserve the meat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So salt and stuff like sugar in the old days, that was commodities. Those were actual like currency. And a lot of people don't think about that going, nowadays. They don't think that they're going to need a lot of salt when, stuff collapses or, hits the fan. You got to have salt.
I believe that there was a time when salt was actually worth more than gold.
Yeah.
For hunter-gatherer, what do you have for the prepper survivalist?
I would encourage anyone who has never been hunting or has never really considered it to start learning about it. Even if it's going to YouTube University and watching, the hunting videos. There's millions of them out there.
Okay, well, I'm a perfect example of that because I've never hunted deer.
Mhm.
I've trapped, I've caught rabbit and I've killed them and eaten them, and obviously I have chickens and all that.
Right.
And I'm not. Look, I get the whole respect for the animal thing, and when I see my herd outside, my flock, let's call them,
Mhm.
I see food.
Yeah.
When Rhonda sees them, she sees Joette and Sylvia, and these are the names. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
For me, I every time I look at that big giant tom turkey I got, I'm like, oh my god! I was sitting with him the other day, and he jumped up on my leg. I'm like, dude, you're gonna be so freaking tasty. You know, it's just how I actually say it out loud. You know, Rhonda looks over me like, you're so wrong. I'm like, no, I'm not. He's got to be tasty. Look at the size of his legs, man.
That's why you don't name your meat. Don't name your food. That's what I say.
But I'm going to take a deer this year.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be my first time around. But what you're saying is that if you're a prepper survivalist, this is another skill that you should probably learn. So
Absolutely.
do you have to go get a tag? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah. So to be legal, of course.
Like if you don't know any hunters, you got yourself a gun, you got a couple of buddies, and you're like, look, I want to go try this. What do I do?
Well, the first thing you need to do is you got to have a license for now. You know, I mean, if you want to be legal, you got to have a license. And then the second thing you need to do is you need to have a place to go. If you don't have a place to go, you have to be willing to hunt public land. Now, there are more people hunting public land than have private property to go hunt. So
you're competing.
You're competing. Yeah. And again, this goes back to the reality of competing for resources. Once you've like gotten out there and you're waiting, this is actually the time where, you know, the sitting in the waiting part for me is just, that's the benign part. When you actually do see a deer that is worth taking, that is legal to take and is ethical to take, that's when this kind of goes back to our conversation about defending your home, controlling your nerves. So a lot of people don't realize this. When a deer enters the area and you're in range and you know you can take them, this sort of, and people call it buck fever. And I don't know if you've experienced it yet, but it's an almost, especially for newcomers, and I still get it. And even if it's a doe, it's this weird sensation that sets in and your body starts to shake uncontrollably and your breath becomes, you know, heavy. And it's this moment, like you have to control your nerves and the shakes in that moment.
Is that right?
It is. And it's the way I can just go on YouTube and look for young kids hunting buck fever. And it looks like they're shivering. It looks like they're freezing to death, even when it's.
Well, I've seen it on like movies, and I'm like, why are they acting like that? I didn't realize that was a thing.
That is very much a thing. And I remember when I was a kid and I took my first deer, and almost every deer ever since, I get that same sensation. It's this excitedness. It's this moment. You got to learn how to control that. And for new hunters I always encourage new hunters to start with a rifle. That's what I encourage, because one, your success probability goes up much, much more, right? And you can learn how to shoot a rifle pretty easily, you know, pretty quickly. If you're delving into archery, and you gotta really learn archery before you even think that you're going to go out and hunt with a bow. But if you have the opportunity to, and you have the inclination to archery hunt, I encourage everybody to try it, because taking an animal with a bow versus taking an animal with a rifle, while both are wonderful, taking an animal with a bow is, in my opinion, like so much better, because one, it's more difficult. Two, there's so many nuances that you have to pay attention to. Sitting still, being quiet, and not getting seen while you're pulling back this bow. Like, because that's what deer are looking for. Deer don't look for you. They're looking for movement. And they'll smell you before they see you, and they'll see you way before you see them. But in the same aspect, they're looking for movement. We should not be looking for a deer. You're looking for movement. That's what you're looking for. because the ears can deceive you, but when you're looking and you actually see that tail up and you see the movement of the deer, that's when the shakes start. And it's incredible. It's kind of hard to describe to somebody who hasn't, like actually felt that. But when you do, you will definitely know. You're going to start rattling, like you're going to be shivering, even though you're not cold. And it might be cold, because it's that time of year, but it's crazy. And, like I can remember the first, because I used to bow hunt a lot. And then I went through my second divorce, because I actually used to competition shoot, and I was sponsored and all that stuff. And I used to hunt a lot with a bow, and I ended up having to sell a majority of everything I owned. And when I got back into it, I started with a lower level, fairly inexpensive a bow. And I told myself I was not allowed to go any more advanced in bow until I killed a deer with that particular bow. Killed a deer with that bow, and I was like shaking like a leaf inside of my blind. It was insane. And then I ended up giving that bow to one of my sons, and I said, "You can't switch up until you've already killed a deer with this bow, and then you have to give that bow to somebody else." So it kind of, one, it keeps the tradition going, but two, it gets somebody who doesn't have the ability to go out and just buy a thing, get them started, So that's what I tell everybody. Yeah. Get started somewhere, somehow.
Where do you get your license and where do you get your tags?
So a tag and a license is the same thing. So,
okay.
Yeah. For almost every state, I don't know every state, but for most states, like here in North Carolina and in Texas, you have what's called, either you can just get straight deer tags, or you can get your what we call a combo license, which is your hunting and your fishing all in one. That's what I tell everybody to do, because if you fish and you hunt, just go ahead and get both. It takes care of both of them at the same time. So here in North Carolina, I have what's called the super combo package, or whatever funny name, but it covers my inland and out and saltwater fishing, and it also covers all of my big game hunting. Some states, like here, you also have to get a certain certification to be able to hunt dove, and then you have to have another certification to be able to hunt migratory birds like ducks and geese and stuff like that. So,
interesting.
Yeah.
How do they know how many deer you've taken? Why can't you just go back out and, not tell them?
Well, that's where the ethics come in. So There's a lot of non-ethical hunters out there. There's some dudes that will kill an antlered deer and report it as a doe.
And that's considered poaching, right?
I guess
illegally hunting.
Yeah, that could be considered a form of poaching, I imagine. But some individuals will do that in order to, get more, I guess. But many states, and I don't know about all states, but many states have switched to a digital reporting system. I know here in North Carolina, we have an app, and it's the Fish and Game app for North Carolina. And you go in there, you get your deer, make sure you get a hold of it and you track it down and all those things first, and then you report it through the app. And it's super simple. In some states, you still actually have to have a physical tag, and you have to take that physical tag off of your card. It's like a perforated, cutaway thing. Yeah. You got to wrap that around the antlers, or the down by the foot of the doe. And then you actually have to take that animal and check it in at a game station. And they
wow.
Yeah. And a lot of states, of course, dealing with CWD, they have mandatory.
I was going to ask you about that. So how do you know? Let's say I go out and I do take a deer this year. How do I know if it's safe to eat?
You can have it checked. You can take it to any state, or
a piece of it.
Well, you can. It's preferred that you take the whole animal. And the reason they say that is not only are they going to test like a sample of that animal, they're going to take a small piece of, tissue or something. You can just test it that way. But what they also want to do is they want to look inside of the mouth, and they want to take a small, very small section of the jaw towards the molars on the deer. And that way they can check for age. And by doing that, and they build that data at the state
database level. Yeah.
That's how they track the health of your herd, how, the mean or average age that, these different deer are being taken. There's a lot of data that goes into it. It's extremely scientific when you get to the state and federal level.
You've done this?
I have taken my animals in to get checked only because there's mandatory testing during certain times of the year.
Yeah.
Now,
right.
CWD and some of the other, bovine diseases that are affecting deer now, it's terrible for them. If you didn't get your deer checked and you froze and then thoroughly cooked and ate that animal, you are not going to get CWD. You're not. That a lot of people think that they are, but you're not. Especially when the disease is early onset in the animal. If a deer was like, no kidding, like dying of CWD,
it's very sad. Yeah,
it's very sad. But you're going to be able to look at that animal and be like, I know
you'll know.
Animal. Yeah.
You'll know.
And
it's like it's drunk. It's like it's walking around and stumbling, and it's horrible.
It's horrible to see. And I know that here in North Carolina, if you cull an animal that you believe has CWD or a bovine disease and it's dying, and you report it immediately to Fish and Game, and they check the animal. If the animal is indeed sick or has that disease, it will not count against your limits. But if you report the animal and you bring it in and they test it and it is clean, then it does count towards your limits.
Gotcha.
So, and we also hunt here on Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg has different rules. That's also federal. So if you take an animal on Fort Bragg property, you still got to report it through, the North Carolina Fish and Game, but you have to physically take that deer into the Fort Bragg check system. They have a couple of different stations because they do all of their statistics at the federal level. So
what's that process like? Do they come out to your truck?
You just pull up. They come out, make sure that you actually have a deer.
You don't come out and be like, that's not a deer. That's your ex-wife.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to toss her in there in the gut pile. But that's not a terrible idea, actually. No. So, but you take the animal to their check station, and like say on main base, they've got a nice facility, but you bring your animal in. The first thing they do is weigh it. And then the second thing they do is they check the teeth, that jaw, that thing that I was telling you about, where they actually go in and they check that jawline and the actual jawbone. They take a small core sample of it and probably the back molar and just take it and just look, make sure what the age is. And now some areas we have what's called a qualitative management program. So in certain areas, it's one of them. It's like, say, on that particular day, it's buck only. Like you can only kill bucks. That buck has to have a certain size, dimension, and points on the antlers to be able to legally kill it. And that is...
Oh, you got to see that before you shoot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's, again, that goes back to the managing a quality deer herd. And, if you take one that's got just, two little spikes, which, God bless it, kill the spike, just like Ted Nugent said. But what they want is you to be able to go ahead and thin out those older bucks, which give those younger bucks an opportunity to grow up unpressured by those older guys. They start to, you grow a better quality animal over time by culling those older males. So, because, again, it comes down to their fighting. It comes down to when they go into the rut, you have a deer that's had dominance over an area. Nobody else has the opportunity to come in there and actually introduce a new DNA line into that herd. So you get
there's so many people that are so against, hunting, and they're saying that it's cruelty to animals and stuff like that. But I can say this. First of all, they haven't done their homework, because it's a lot like people that are like, save the trees. Well, I have a forester coming out in 2 weeks to my property. It's a service that the state gives you. It's free.
Yeah.
And I've been talking to him, and the reason why is because I'm going to have my timber cut and sell it for some money. But the forester comes out and shows you how to do that in a way that helps the forest. And in the process of learning this, I learned that by cutting certain trees down and leaving other trees up, you're actually making the forest healthier by doing that. Yeah. You're not killing trees and killing the environment. You're actually helping the environment by doing that. It's the same thing with hunting.
Yeah.
Right. So all the anti-hunters, just shut up your face. Okay.
Yeah. And it's because they don't understand. If we didn't have hunters, the population and health of the, hunted animals would go out of control, and they would all die of disease, or they would die of killing each other. And if there's not enough predation from predatory animals to cull these herds down, what happened in the Yellowstone before they reintroduced the wolf is what will happen everywhere.
Right. In areas like mine, there was lots and lots of bears, and bears ate the deer, and that's how it worked. It was natural. But then people moved in, and all the bears were gone, but the deer weren't. And then all of a sudden you have an explosion of deer. Now what are you going to do? Well, let's hunt the deer. We affect stuff, so we have to fix the stuff.
Yeah. 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 And again, and I guess in closing, I would just tell everybody, hunting may not be for you. It may not be your thing. And I get that. But what you're learning now to do by hunting and really controlling those populations and the health of the population of those game animals is ensuring that if something were to happen, if, the S does truly hit the fan and you're able to hunt in the future, you have a better opportunity then to be able to get and preserve and to save that meat for your family by learning to do it now. You cannot just go out in the woods and you cannot just go kill a thing. If you don't get out there and learn how to do it now, you're not going to be able to do it in the future.
My prepper brothers and sisters, the fire's down to embers now. The air is thick with wood smoke and memory. Out there beyond the tree line, the night is alive again. The whisper of leaves, the distant call of something hunting, something surviving. It's the same sound our ancestors heard as they crouched beside their fires, clutching spears instead of rifles, wearing hides instead of Kevlar. And somehow it feels like we've come full circle. If we experience a collapse, we may find ourselves standing right where they once stood, at the edge of the unknown, hungry, determined, stripped of every comfort we thought we couldn't live without. That's when instinct takes over. That's when the pulse of the hunter-gatherer begins thumping in our veins once again. It won't be easy. It never was. But survival was never meant to be easy. It was meant to be earned through grit and patience and the will to see another sunrise. So as you step away from this fire tonight, remember, what's coming won't favor the comfortable. It will favor the capable, the observant, the prepared, the ones who can hear the land speak and answer it with steady hands. The spirit of the hunter-gatherer isn't gone. It's just been waiting for the world to get quiet enough to hear it again. Stay prepped, stay happy. Thanks for listening, and good night.